The secrets of life are revealed in the laboratories of the Simic, and their research notes plumb and catalog nature's wonders. Their original mission was to oversee issues of public health, but the Simic came to believe that complete health of individuals and of society as a whole depends on the mutual adaptation of nature and civilization to one another. Thus, biological experimentation has always been among its primary concerns. Welcome to the Simic Combine. Rules, Keywords, and Mechanics. My name is Jared. I'm a level 1 judge, and this is MTG. Adapt. Adapt N means, if this permanent has no +1/+1 counters on it, put N +1/+1 counters on it. You can always activate an ability that will cause a creature to adapt. That ability resolves. If the creature has a +1/+1 counter on it for any reason, you simply won't put any +1/+1 counters on it. If a creature somehow loses all of its +1/+1 counters, it can adapt again and get more +1/+1 counters. Evolve. Evolve is a triggered ability. Evolve means, whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, if that creature's power is greater than this creature's power, and/or that creature's toughness is greater than this creature's toughness, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. A creature evolves when one or more +1/+1 counters are put on it as a result of its evolve ability resolving. A creature can't have a greater power or toughness than a non-creature permanent. If a creature has multiple instances of evolve, each will trigger separately. When comparing the stats of the two creatures, you'll always compare power to power and toughness to toughness. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, check its power and toughness against the power and toughness of the creature with evolve. If neither stat of the new creature is greater, evolve won't trigger at all. For example, you control a 3/2 creature with evolve, and a 2/2 creature enters the battlefield under your control. You won't have the opportunity to cast a spell like Giant Growth to make the 2/2 creature large enough to cause evolve to trigger. If evolve triggers, the stat comparison will happen again when the ability tries to resolve. If neither stat of the new creature is greater, the ability will do nothing. If the creature that entered the battlefield leaves the battlefield before evolve tries to resolve, use its last known power and toughness to compare the stats. If a creature enters the battlefield with +1/+1 counters on it, consider those counters when determining if evolve will trigger. For example, a 1/1 creature that enters the battlefield with 3 +1/+1 counters on it will cause the evolve ability of a 3/2 creature to trigger. If multiple creatures enter the battlefield at the same time, evolve may trigger multiple times, although the stat comparison will take place each time one of those abilities tries to resolve. For example, if you control the 3/2 creature with evolve, and two 3/3 creatures enter the battlefield, evolve will trigger twice. The first ability will resolve and put a +1/+1 counter on the creature with evolve. When the second ability tries to resolve, neither the power nor the toughness of the new creature is greater than that of the creature with evolve, so that ability does nothing. When comparing the stats as the evolve ability resolves, it's possible that the stat that's greater changes from power to toughness or vice versa. If this happens, the ability will still resolve, and you'll put a +1/+1 counter on the creature with evolve. For example, if you control a 3/2 creature with evolve, and a 1/4 greater forgeling enters the battlefield under your control, its toughness is greater, so evolve will trigger. In response, you activate the greater forgeling's ability to give it +3/-3 until end of turn. When the evolve trigger tries to resolve, its power is greater, so you'll still put a +1/+1 counter on the creature with evolve. Graft. Graft represents both a static ability and a triggered ability. Graft N means, this permanent enters the battlefield with N +1/+1 counters on it, and, whenever another creature enters the battlefield, if this permanent has a +1/+1 counter on it, you may move a +1/+1 counter from this permanent onto that creature. If a permanent has multiple instances of Graft, each one will work separately. All creatures with Graft are 0/0 creatures. When the last +1/+1 counter is moved off of it, it will be put into its owner's graveyard as a state-based action unless some other effect is boosting its toughness. Graft's Triggered ability triggers each time a creature enters the battlefield, regardless of who controls the new creature. A player may move a +1/+1 counter onto another player's creature this way. When a creature enters the battlefield, all Graft abilities will trigger. The controllers of those abilities choose, one at a time, as those abilities resolve, whether to move a counter or not. A creature that has just entered the battlefield may receive multiple +1/+1 counters this way. Graft isn't targeted. The ability can move a counter onto an untargetable creature or a creature with protection from creatures. A counter moved off a creature with Graft as the Graft ability resolves doesn't have to be one of the counters put on the card as the result of the Graft ability. It can be any +1/+1 counter on it. No other types of counters may be moved in this way. If a permanent with Graft isn't a creature when a new creature enters the battlefield, the Graft ability will still trigger and a +1/+1 counter may still be moved. If a creature with Graft and another creature enter the battlefield simultaneously, the Graft ability will trigger. The ability's controller may move a +1/+1 counter onto the other creature. Many creatures with Graft also have an activated ability that targets a creature with a +1/+1 counter on it. In most cases, that means it can target itself. The target creature may have any number of +1/+1 counters on it. The target creature does not have to have Graft. If the target of such an activated ability loses all of its +1/+1 counters before the ability resolves, the ability will not be resolved for having an illegal target. If the targeted creature loses all of its +1/+1 counters after the ability resolves, it won't lose the bonus it was granted by the ability. Imagine a perfect world, one in which nature and civilization exist in harmony, adapted to each other, one in which life is shaped to match its environment, and the environment is shaped to match life. That's the world they've been trying to grow in the laboratories of the Simic Combine. Nature is all about adaptation, evolution, and balance. But for it to keep up with the pace of advancing civilization, nature needs some help from biomancers and terraformers. If, along the way, they happen to create super soldiers or mutant monsters that can bolster the Combine's defenses against the schemes and ambitions of the other guilds, so much the better. I think it's about time we remove that slaw from incubation, don't you think?